Amazing. Okay, here we are. Accidental Zodiac. I'm CV Henriette of Art of the Zodiac, astrologer. Okay, here we are. Accidental Zodiac. I'm CV Henriette of Art of the Zodiac, astrologer. Hey, here we are. Accidental Zodiac. I'm CV Henriette of Art of the Zodiac. What is happening? Astrologer.
Mercury Retrograde.
Accidental Zodiac. I'm CV Henriette of Art of the Zodiac. Astrologer.
Mercury Retrograde. Oh my God. If we keep talking, it'll just keep repeating in a loop forever and ever 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 and ever.
I think I figured out what's happening. We're still alive.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm CV Henriette, Art of the Zodiac. We're not talking about Mercury retrograde. That's happening. Hi, William. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi. Hi, I'm William Holloway, astrologer. Yeah, we're having some, Mercury retrograde shadow, situations.
You were like looking somewhere. You looked like you had like a moment there.
Oh, I don't know what I was doing. I was moving.
I like that we're both kind of spacey, so this is kind of fun.
Yeah.
At any rate, we are two spacey astrologers.
No.
I wasn't trying to be funny. We're here talking about the astrology of loss. Specifically, so you and I were doing a live stream, actually. So we did a video for Capricorn season where we looked at the charts of Dolly Parton, Betty White, and Lucille Ball. And then shortly after, Betty White passed, rest in peace. And so then, and then Sidney Poitier, I can't pronounce his name. Poitier?
Cindy Poitier.
I can't. I feel like,
something like that.
I have a blocker of French words. Wonderful actor. He passed too. And then, of course, Bob Sagat died. So we started looking at these charts. We have been talking about death charts. I don't know if that's a proper word. Can you hear me? Did I lose you for a minute? I'm rambling with this monologue.
You're all kinds of pieces.
Oh, okay. Am I back now?
Now you're back.
Okay, that's weird. I think that might be you, but I don't know.
It's probably me.
Okay. So at any rate, we and I have been talking. We had been looking at charts of people who had passed, comparing their birth chart to the chart of the day of their passing. And we just started. It was interesting because this is something that's not original to us, but thinking about for a while, I think both of us had been thinking about the role that maybe the benefics play in people's deaths, right? Specifically Jupiter, but also Venus, and then also maybe not a benefic, but Mercury as well. And so I thought it was really interesting that all three, and now, of course, today, Ronnie Spector just passed away this evening. All of these deaths happened just as Jupiter went into Pisces, right? So we have this really big Jupiter, and then also as Venus is retrograde. So today we will be talking about just the astrology of loss in general, but specifically we'll be looking at it through three charts. Betty White's, Sidney, whose name I cannot pronounce.
Sidney Poitier.
Poitier? I think so. It looks like I'm have a fear of mispronouncing people's names. And Bob Sagat. Which I feel like I can't say his name without cringing. Just everyone knows my feelings.
Yeah.
So we'll be looking at those three charts, but I think we wanted to start off with just a general conversation about the astrological weather as of late in general.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll let you sort of take over.
Yeah, well, some of the big things, that are happening are the obviously still Venus retrograde, which we just we just passed the halfway point. So we're slowly coming on the other side of that. And then Jupiter in Pisces just happened right before the new year. So we're all kind of, these are, I feel like a lot of the themes that we're seeing just in the news can kind of, you can really point to these transits and get a lot from it because there's just so much going on.
Totally. And you, if you want to share, you pulled up, I feel like you're really good at, I'm not feeling this. I know you're really good at finding absurd news articles, and you
Yeah.
shared 3 with me this week.
Mhm.
2 of them maybe being more absurd than the other.
Right.
I'll let you speak to those.
Well, for absurd, well, I guess, yeah. So, okay, let me pull these up because I wanted to be able to, like, if we're going to talk about it, I should at least be able to read from some of them.
I mean, the ones, what was the, I feel like the ones now that I think about it, the ones that we pointed out today aren't totally absurd, but you did have.
Right. Yeah. The first one I was
One.
thinking of was the pig heart. And now my phone's not working. But I did just read the article and a few articles about it. And yeah, they successfully transplanted a pig heart into a human on Monday, I believe. Or no, last week. As of Monday, it had been 3 or 4 days and he was alive, breathing, still in the hospital. So far, so good. Obviously, there's going to be, we'll see what happens after we get a Venus retrograde. But it's a wild thing, but also like they've never been able to successfully do that before. Is this the future of, he was waiting apparently for a human heart and he wasn't going to get it in time, which is so insane, right?
Yeah.
Think about how people die because they're waiting for a heart, and he was able to get a pig heart. So if that actually worked, I mean, that's going to change a lot of things in medicine. And
no, that's amazing. I'm just like really like thinking about the symbolism really quickly. Of course, there's like at a personal level, right? There's this like renewal of his heart. Like he gets this new heart, which is, God bless. I hope it sticks. So there's
right before
that.
the Kazemi, actually. He had on Friday.
Really?
It was, Friday was when he had the surgery, when they did it. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's really beautiful. That's like thinking like, yeah, I mean, there's just like, so this, like someone's literal, right? We think about Venus retrograde and we think of matters of the heart being up for review. And in this case, this person literally gets a new heart, right? And so it just feels like this really interesting example of a physical heart at play.
Yeah.
And so like, there's those, Venus metaphors, but then also too, like, I don't know, like, I feel like maybe the dystopian side of it, like I'm happy that there are transplants for people who need organs, but I feel there could be a sinister side to all of this.
Oh, 100%. There's always a shadow.
And I feel that's a little like Jupiter and Pisces with that whole like it's really beautiful and really great. Yeah, but this could maybe possibly be a little sinister. I think you're the one who's, and this is kind of like blends the transits together. I think you were talking about, did you describe Jupiter and Pisces as being a little sinister or the sinister side to it?
Yeah, it makes me think of like, I don't know, like Wizard of Oz, or like, it's like, it's almost like too much of a good thing, or like, it's something that's really saturated, right? Like, no barriers, no boundaries, and we can't always, that's not going to work all the time. It's going to be great and feel good for many scenarios, but it's not going to be helpful in a lot of areas where it needs to be,
especially with Neptune there, right? I think that's like my brain, like, oh, my brain hurts. I think that's the real like dystopian aspect coming into play.
Yeah,
like, wow, this is great, we're going to have a world where like people are going to have organs whenever they need them, but I feel like somehow that could go wrong.
Right. I mean, how long, we don't know what living with a pig heart. I'm not a doctor, so I have no idea. I don't know what it'd be like to live with a pig heart. A person with a pig heart doesn't know what it's like to live with a pig heart until they've lived with a pig heart for however long you live with a pig heart.
And I just imagine this like really sad scenario where maybe like pig hearts are like superior. So you have like rich people hoarding pigs and just like these like farms full of like pigs being, grown for their organs.
Well,
Right?
yeah,
They do with
that's
some people, right? Like that's what I'm sorry, my mind's really like dark. I go there. Or
yeah.
like being like, oh, like it's to my advantage to like have whatever body part for whatever animal. Just thinking of some, I know this is far off, right? Like I'm not
No, but you know, it
not
does
my
make me,
personal conspiracy, but
but it does make me think about how, you know, there's a lot of talk and a lot of more people are going vegetarian. There's more reason to than ever.
yeah,
And you know, I could see a strange switch where all of a sudden like people are eating meat, but now we're taking the animals and doing other crazy stuff with them. Like
yeah.
taking you know what I mean? I don't know. I'm just yeah, like yeah, trying to think of the shadow side because there's always one, right? So like you want to like kind of see what is that?
And maybe just the sort of surreal side of things. I just imagined people like implanting like horse bodies so we could have like actual centaurs.
Oh, one day, yeah.
I know we're just rambling here, but I think this is so okay. So that was the first news item, which kind of goes into this second one about Hulk Hogan,
Yeah,
which I thought it was interesting because I was looking. I don't know what I was looking up. I was looking
I
up
think
maybe
it's a
something about
news
Betty
week.
White, huh?
It was a Newsweek with the
It was
article I
Newsweek,
saw.
yeah. And so they're like Hulk Hogan has come under heat for claiming that the COVID boosters killed Bob Saget and Betty White, which just feel I guess like
Yeah,
I don't know, I guess it's cool if you believe that, but to me it feels very like delusional, and it feels just like it's interesting to think that when we look at it, this Jupiter and Pisces can be this like really dreamy thing that can like take you back, but it can also really like clog, like I feel like it can fuzzy people's minds, but maybe that's
yeah. It'll fuzzy people's minds. And then I just because I was looking at the article and I was looking at the deleted like I don't know, it was on Facebook or something, and it was just all these like comments, and you're just looking at your typical, just like people saying a bunch of random stuff. Oh yeah, well, she got the booster on January 21st. And it's like, who are these people? These are just random people saying whatever they want. And that's how all this stuff gets started.
Mhm.
But it's also very, you know, you just say whatever and then walk away from it. And then next thing you know, it's become the new reality. Um, this is very Neptunian and it's dangerous. It is dangerous, I think.
um it might be the most dangerous thing about Hulk Hogan at the moment.
Yeah.
um, um yeah. What else? Sorry. Notes. The US, the COVID tests. I thought this was interesting. Oh, you
Yes.
see that.
Yeah. So yeah, this will be interesting because it seems like finally under pressure the government is going to make the COVID tests that you can get them through
The
your
US government.
insurance or the US government.
Government, yeah.
Yeah, is going to make COVID tests available. It's kind of, I've read several articles, and of course, like everything, it's confusing. They're saying that they're going to allow a certain amount per household, depending on your insurance. There's going to be a website that goes up the day after retrograde starts on Saturday, apparently this
Oh
Saturday,
yeah.
where you're going to be able to go on and order tests, a certain amount per household. So we'll see.
That just kind of sounds
At the
like a
beginning of
nightmare.
retrograde, this will see how that.
I'm
Yeah.
listening to, I'm like, obviously I'm listening to you. I want to see if we have any questions. I'm trying to figure out how this works. So don't mind me for a moment. I can do this without.
Yeah. But it'll be interesting to see, you know, I mean, anything that's new, like a website like this, it makes me think of Obamacare, even though this is probably not going to be nearly as complicated. But it's just, we'll see. We'll see how it works. We'll see how easy it is to do this, to just go
Where
online and get these.
where is this where is this you have the Sibley chart pulled up. Where is this
Yeah.
retrograde happening in the US chart?
Let's see. Let me pull it up. And okay. All right.
Oh. Okay, so this would be the second house.
You know, it's funny, everyone keeps talking about the Pluto return like it hasn't started already. Like, we're in it. Like, we're in it.
Mm-hmm.
We've been in it.
Oh, yeah. It's just coming to its height.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's interesting that so Venus in this chart is, so the Venus retrograde, right, in the second house of resources, finances, sixth house of health. I'm trying to think in a mundane, what would I know it's a little different, what the associations of the sixth house would be, besides that. And the 11th house, the people, right? So, yeah, I mean, I'm curious. Yeah, I'm curious to see. I feel like this is just going to be like a nightmare of like suddenly like not enough tests, like the website doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, we've already been, you know, I mean, I was trying to run errands earlier. It's like everywhere, there's signs everywhere that they're out of tests everywhere. And they've been, I mean, this has been the thing. This has been the problem. This is why they're even creating this to begin with. But we'll see.
Because you're on the East Coast. Because I know my partner's on the East Coast, and like it's super hard to get, like, I feel like it's more difficult to get vaccines there, boosters there. I feel like there's longer lines in these more densely populated areas.
I had to make my booster appointment 2 hours away. That was the only way I could get it. I had to go 2 hours, drive 2 hours.
Wait, really?
I mean, I was visiting my mother for Christmas, so I made that all work together, and it was right around the corner from where she lived. But yeah, that's how I had to do it.
Oh, sure. But I'm saying, wow, like it's interesting how different it is from state to state, because I'm in Detroit where things are, I think, pretty plentiful. And also I think there might be issues with getting people to, actually, I don't know the statistics as of recently, so I can't speak to that. But yeah, it's interesting how diverse things are.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's also part of the confusion, is that it's different in every state, in every city.
Mm-hmm.
So the answer to the problem is different everywhere, or the response, maybe I should say, is different everywhere based on what's happening. I don't know. It's chaos.
Sure.
It's not the most chaos. It could be a lot worse.
Totally.
Somehow, but it's a little wild.
Oh man. What else? I'm trying to think as we're staring at this. You sent me something. I'm gonna feel like I want to go back. You were sending me some super, like, I feel like all Venus retrograde, you've been sending me some super absurd headlines.
Yeah.
I'm literally going back on my things to check. Okay, this one, the sergeant, this.
It was. Well.
Okay, maybe I'm just bad at this. We should keep talking. As I look.
So
you've had, you've maybe personally any stories to share about this time, or maybe just you're like because I know we've been rambling a bit, but thinking of people who are listening here and maybe they want to, like, they're curious about how this season might be affecting them, like Venus retrograde. Maybe you could speak to general symbolisms of this transit, and maybe some of the ways that shown up with you or your clients.
Yeah, I think the two big areas of people's lives I've seen the most affected have been relationships and work.
Okay.
First, relationships. A lot of people are being.
Should we take the chart down?
Oh yeah.
Okay, listening to you.
So, yeah, a lot of people are like they're like running into exes, or they're having difficult discussions with family members or people, their partners, or there's like issues coming up, things that are like from the past that haven't been totally dealt with. You know, a lot of that. And or I'm seeing things with like work related, you know, you're seeing a lot of and then this kind of ties into, this is very like feels almost like Mercury retrograde in a sense when you think about the work part, in that there just seems to be a lot of like disconnect about like a lot of people are finding issues regarding like monetary things, or like their raises or positions that they were hired for, and then it changed, or the start date gets pushed back, or the position they were hired for is now a completely different thing. Renegotiating, like there's like having to redo things, or this is, you know, at work, and it's affecting people. Some of it's just really frustrating, and then other people it's like, you know, like I need to start my new job. You know, that kind of like way. There's a lot of just like no, which is what happens, you know.
You're a little shaky.
Can you see me? Can you hear me?
I can see you. I can see you better now. I'm shaking for a moment. Yeah, I mean, just thinking about general, like Venus, if I'm hearing you correctly here, to build on that, Venus symbolizing, right, our relationship to love, right, but also to money to some extent, like our resources. And so having all of these things, depending on where it falls in your house chart, houses, etc., right, like these are all things that can be up for review right now. Review being the retrograde word. And so, yeah, it feels a lot of people are either frustrated about like job, money position situations right now. I've seen like real estate stuff, or like just in general, like relationships going through extra stress. And it's been really difficult. And maybe there's like, someone has a better answer than me, but knowing that Venus is retrograde, Mercury is about to retrograde, Mars is about to just like hop into the mix here. Really, it doesn't, to me, I don't feel anyone's going to get really any clarity. Like the situation's going to come to a crisis, but I don't think like there's going to be any relief until early March. Are you vibing on that with me? Is that?
Yeah. It's kind of like, I'm just like personally feeling like there, and I think a lot of people felt this, there was kind of a, and I think I used the word crescendo, like a kind of like leading up to like the Cazimi.
Sure.
And now being on the other side of it, I feel like for me personally,
yeah,
yes, it's like knowing and understanding now that there's going to be like a period of time that needs to pass almost before be clarity, and now like kind of being a little bit more aware of that, being okay with it, whereas before it was before all of that. So it's a kind of, oh, I cut out again.
Okay, can you see me?
Yeah.
So I think speaking to this before and after, I think a word you used was clarity, and I feel that the first part of this retrograde was all about being like, the matter was like pushed into our faces, whether it be like we are presented with, oh shit, I didn't like, what's happening with the job promotion, what's happening with my relationship, we are sort of, or why are all these old people coming into my life? It just felt like this onslaught of subject matter before the Cazimi. And then I think the Cazimi really offered this glimpse of like, oh, this is what's like, if you're listening, this is what this story's about, right? And then it feels like the next part is like, okay, now, as we talked about in our podcast with Spencer, right? Now we've moved into the 3 of coins energy, where suddenly we're like, okay, what is the blueprint for the future? And that's awesome, but super frustrating because we're still in retrograde. And so it's like, great, like now I know I'm working towards, but nothing around me seems to be conspiring. Like I can't get it done. And I feel that's been the general feeling, at least for me and people I've encountered.
Yeah, it's kind of like right before New Year's. That sense of like, all right, here comes 2022. I'm going to do all this stuff. I'm going to redo this, or I'm going to revamp that, or
Yeah.
I'm going to start doing things this way. You know, I think a lot of people were just like, time for the next stage. And now we're here, and it's like, well, there's a lot of stuff that's preventing a lot of us from like actually getting there. So we're still like, oh, there is more to do, whether that is just waiting or pondering what needs to be done, making lists about like what are priorities. For me, that's a big part of it. It's what are the priorities? There's all of these things. And before it was like making me feel crazy. And now it's like, well, you have to prioritize.
Oh, I like that. I feel like even though maybe some of the outer, like there are forces outside of us that might be preventing us from getting what we want, that the way we can deal with like managing our own stuff by prioritizing. Right. So like I feel like that's good advice for just people who feel totally helpless right now, because it is frustrating. Like if you're looking for a house, but like, you know, you're having issues with the real estate agent that are beyond your control, or you don't hear back from work, or like, you know, things with your partner seem fuzzy. And it feels like there's so many people that are, I feel like this is a heightened awareness right now of like understanding that like we depend on other people. And sometimes we can't get them to cooperate with us.
Yeah, that's certainly part of it. Another part of it, I think, is I just lost it. I had it, lost it. I had a whole thought.
Okay. It's okay. I blame the other transit. So we talked a little bit about Jupiter and Pisces. Ultimately, I know we're sort of taking our wanderings here. We wanted to set out this Venus retrograde moment, but ultimately we wanted to talk about, right? So this Venus subjects being up for review, right? But then also Venus having, I would say, playing a part in all, what does it look like when Venus retrograde plays a part in someone's passing, right? I think that's the ultimate question here. So we sort of set that out, but I think you had a aha moment when I said that.
I was remembering kind of what I was going to say, and it actually tied in with tying it to the death stuff, because
yes, please do.
So I was going to say that part of that review and part of that prioritization that I'm seeing for myself and other people, I think, are probably saying is that like that feeling of like possibly, oh, I thought I already like shed a bunch of this stuff, right? I feel like I already got rid of what needed to be let go of. But I think a lot of us are kind of realizing there's a lot more that we need to let go of. There's still more that needs to be, and there's still more that needs to be released.
Yeah. You keep disappearing. I hope I can get you back. He's gone. He's gone. I'm going to talk to myself. You're back. You were gone.
I hear you. I think I hear you.
Can you hear me? Because I can see you.
Yeah.
Okay, good. You left, but you were saying there's more to be released. Maybe we talk about the Jupiter stuff in context of the charts, because this makes me think it's interesting. Maybe we want to pull up Betty White's chart, because I was thinking how interesting it is that she passed right before the Kazemi, right?
Yeah. Well, it was New Year's Eve.
When was the Kazemi? The
Kazemi was this last.
Yeah, so before it happened.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
I'm like, I know I can't do time, but I think I'm right. So I was just thinking about this idea, right? You're like, oh, like we realize we have more to let go of, or there's just so much more. And it's interesting, like Betty White, like I love this idea of like being like, but actually, no, it's done. There's something really beautiful to that.
Yeah, that's it, right? It's like some people have a lot more to let go of, and some people have let go just enough.
Did you remember when she passed, the day to pull the second chart up? Or do you want me to pull that up?
Yeah, let me I can just, it was actually on Friday the 31st. Because we were doing a live when it was announced. So it was that morning.
Yeah. Oh, we were talking
Okay.
about this. Okay, go on. I'll let you start. Observations here.
So
Oh, can I say something?
yeah,
So
go.
I was thinking that we were talking about, you could just following this trail here, right? Of like part of this Venus retrograde, like before the Gazimi, of being like, here is all the stuff you have to deal with, right? And then the second part being like, okay, like let's get to work. And it's interesting because it felt like maybe like the fact that Venus rules her 10th house of career going retrograde. I feel like there's something really beautiful. It's like you've done all your work. Like now you get to
Right.
you get to go. You finished it.
You finished. That's true. Yeah.
On
There's
her Venus
that.
return. Sorry.
And her Venus return. Yeah, that's what was the first thing I was going to say was the Venus return. And there's been this well, it makes sense because they've all been famous people that have died. So Mercury's been playing a part in this too, right?
Mhm.
Like spreading the word.
Also, too, though, I feel Mercury being the messenger, but also the messenger between this world and the underworld, right? So
The
there's this
magician.
the magician, right? So thinking about Mercury as literally like taking their hand and passing them to the other side is a really beautiful symbolism.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that. We were talking about that earlier, like thinking of the benefics plus Mercury and their role in death. And it's just interesting to think about the different ways, we often think of like the malefics or like the nodes of fate when it comes to death. And there's always often are there, but there does seem to be a thing often with like Jupiter or Mercury, like when, well, we can look at a Jupiter chart when we talk about Jupiter and death, but I have seen a thing when Jupiter's gone, ingressed into a new sign, that tends to be like the release for certain people when they pass.
For sure. And I think specifically that's what we were talking about, right? Jupiter specifically in Pisces. We've seen this a lot. Like Jupiter, like I've seen so many clients where someone will be sick and then Jupiter goes into Pisces and you're thinking, oh, well, this is a good thing. But Jupiter, I mean, this is going to feel good maybe, right? It can still be a good thing. But then like, look at this. Jupiter had just ingressed into Pisces when she passed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen it in others too. What was I was saying it kind of, like where we were talking about Mercury being this like hand being like, here, come with me, like, or the magician, right? They disappear. Maybe I'm thinking of it like the ghost of or maybe not that, like you think of like the different people that take you, like the person that comes, like whatever, the ghost or spirit that comes and takes you to the next realm. And I think of like Jupiter, I imagine this like giant hot air balloon kind of coming by a la Wizard of Oz, and being like, here, come with us, we're off, we're taking you somewhere else, to somewhere bigger and better.
Yeah, I love that. You had the idea that the hot air balloon of like coming through and like when it's your time. And it's interesting to think too, like in both this chart and Bob Saget's chart, again, whose name I cannot say without cringing. We'll get to that. Jupiter's making an opposition to the moon, right? By sign, right? This one, it's not as close, but I think there's something like
Right.
thinking about like the Jupiter, thinking about the moon being your body to some extent, right? And thinking about Jupiter coming through and releasing you. And especially too, Jupiter's our 8th house of death, right?
Yeah. I just pulled up Bob's.
Yeah, we could see that happening too.
What day was that he passed? Was that last?
No. Was it last night or the night before last?
Oh, I wrote it down. It's right here. The 9th. All right, the 9th. Right. So
Oh, wait, no, he was having yeah. Jupiter opposite the moon because they both had moon and Virgo,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yep. Jupiter opposite the moon. And then, of course, the South Node right on his Saturn.
So for clarity, to clarify, should we just go back to Betty White's chart real quick? And
Yeah.
And you know what? I realized that we're just sort of, this is a rambling conversation,
Yeah.
which we record, but we should give people the benefit of the doubt if they don't know who Betty White is, as we've already
Yes.
spent so much time talking about her passing. Like, also shame on you. But William, I will let you describe who Betty White was.
Betty White was one of the biggest television icons that we've ever had, because she was there since the very beginning when television was essentially invented.
Mm-hmm.
She's been on television ever since. And what are, I mean, who doesn't know?
Comedian, famous game show host, not host, game show contestant.
Yes, she was married to a game show host.
Mm-hmm. Isn't it interesting? I feel like how many celebrities are famous game show contestants these days?
Oh, you mean like from back in the day or like now?
Like now. So Betty White was an actor, producer. But she also, I think there was a time she was always working, but I think was it like in the 60s and 70s where I feel like she was just on game shows. Password. What are some of the other ones?
Yeah. Password was a big one. She was on all of them.
Yeah.
I mean, you just Google or go on YouTube and just Betty White game shows. There's a lot of great clips.
And then, of course, she was on the Golden Girls. And
yeah,
then I think what in the 90s and the 2000s, was it Hot in Cleveland? Was that in 2000?
Hot in Cleveland. Yeah, 2000s.
Yeah. So,
and yeah.
Oh, so to summarize, she was an amazing human animal rights activist, which is interesting to think about too, right? We weren't not going to talk at her chart at length, which we did in another podcast, but we could see this 6th house of work and routine, but also small animals, and having her natal sun Venus there. And this is literally someone who never stopped working and also devoted their life to some extent to small animals.
Yeah, she actually, I heard a quote recently where she said something along the lines of like her real job was taking care of animals and her part-time job was like Hollywood or whatever.
Oh, that totally makes sense. Her 6th, yeah. So Jupiter opposite the moon. What else? No, thinking about like Venus retrograde, right? Like this, like how I keep thinking about what it means when Venus takes something back, and thinking about in the underworld experience. I like imagining it as this hot air balloon, which is interesting because Venus retrograde is supposed to be Venus in her underworld journey, right? So when Venus is retrograde, she is said to be convening with the dead, right? And so it's interesting. Like there's go on.
I was gonna say like very Plutonian.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting because Venus has been and is still in this chart next to Pluto and Mercury. But you were talking a little bit about Pluto earlier and how, which is interesting because she has Pluto hanging, like, it's interesting too. We were talking about Pluto being an amplifier because, and I don't know what she was going through, but it feels like she had a very like peaceful death, which is interesting too. So we were talking, sorry, I'm just going back on myself, but usually we think about Pluto transits as being very difficult and really like points of crisis. And I suppose, death is difficult, but in this case, it feels, I don't know, her whole death feels sort of very beautiful. Again, I don't know her, but
yeah.
Talk to me about I'm sorry, this is a great time for you to talk about Pluto as an amplifier, because
Yeah, I've been thinking about like how sometimes Pluto just puts an exclamation point on something.
Yeah.
Um, and there's like, we talk about Jupiter like kind of expanding things, but
Mhm.
Pluto also kind of does that, right? Like kind of blows everything up. So
Yeah.
they're similar in that way, without however way you think about blowing up. I mean, but
It's interesting too to think about like thinking about the matter you're working with, right? And so if there's like some difficult subject matter and Pluto comes in and blows it up, Pluto's kind of like throwing it in your face, like, hey, deal with this.
yeah,
But Pluto can also, but if there's, I feel like this is sort of a longer conversation, but it feels like Pluto could just maybe bring the matter to a crisis. And sometimes the matter is more difficult than other times. And it feels in this case, Pluto was hanging out, spending time with Venus, and the matters come to a crisis, but it's almost like it's time, if that makes sense.
yeah. Well, it sounds like she passed pretty fast. She had a stroke 6 days before she actually died.
Okay.
And having been with people, elderly people who have passed in that way, where they have it's common to have a stroke and then several strokes, and then you kind of deteriorate over a period of time.
Sure.
And then, but because I've had family members where it's been this like elongated thing. It's like my grandmother had a stroke every Friday for like 3 months. It was like every Friday a stroke, and then she deteriorated a little bit more every Friday. So I've always had that in my mind of like, you could have that journey, you could take that long. And I don't know, she might have had that story too. I don't know, but from what I've read, it sounds like it happened pretty fast. So it kind of feels like a sweeping.
Like the hot air balloon swept her away. Now I'm just sort of rambling tangentially. Well, I mean, now I'm going to continue to ramble to say, I think it's fascinating that Saturn was in her seventh house. And maybe I'm really grasping here, but I think when I think of Saturn for the seventh house, I think of two things. One, it can end a relationship, but also it can deepen a relationship. And I think her last words, someone sent me this randomly. I wasn't searching on the internet. My friend Jackie, her last words were in regard to her late husband.
Yep.
Help me out with his name.
I don't, was it Gary? I always think everyone from back then's name was Gary. I don't, Gary was a good old guy. I don't know.
I just think of Gary the goose. I'm gonna look at his name up. But anyway, so her last words were regard to her husband. And I was thinking like, oh, that's like really sweet. Like if you believe in an afterlife, like the Saturn was deepening their relationship. So whether it's in her mind or not, this like connection with her partner through Saturn, Saturn being limit, Saturn being death, but also the dissolving of that. Alan Ludden.
Alan. Yes.
Not quite Gary.
Not quite. I think Gary was Lucille Ball's second husband. That's where I'm getting
that makes sense. That makes sense. By the way, we could take a moment to say how we could point out the password episode where Betty White stands up for Lucille Ball. So this is not quite a tangent, but how fantastically terrifying was the Meet the Ricardos? Is that the name of the movie?
Yes. Oh my God, it's CGI hell.
Is it actually? So we're taking a moment from Betty White to talk about Betty White's good friend, Lucille Ball. Maybe we should just chat and put the chart. Like, should we just put our faces up for a moment?
Yeah, why not? Yeah. So Lucille
Ball.
We
can get the full breath of what we're saying.
Yeah. Lucille Ball was not a Capricorn, but she had a lot of Capricorn energy. Where'd it go?
Oh, I meant our chart. Sorry, I meant us. But you can pull her chart too for fun.
Well, I don't have it right here.
Okay.
Which chart did you want me to pull?
Oh no, I just meant you could put the chart down for a moment. Sorry.
Got it.
It's more of conversation mode.
Yeah.
I did want to take a moment, a break, if you will, to talk about this film, to get your feelings. I have feelings.
Yeah, I have feelings too.
So maybe describe it. I'm handing these things to you. Do you want to describe the film for those who don't know what we're talking about?
It's a biopic.
Biopic. Is it called?
It's a biopic.
Okay.
Yeah, it's called is it called Being the Ricardos?
Being the Ricardos. Thank you.
And it's Aaron Sorkin doing a biopic, which I'm not a huge fan of biopics. I'd rather see a documentary. Biopics can be so silly. And it's a little silly. It had good moments. It had a lot of silly, weird moments. But basically, it's a week in Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz's life, working on their show. And Nicole Kidman plays Lucille Ball, which is wild.
Wildly terrifying. Yeah, it's that laugh. Whenever she laughs, it's like it hurts. It's like nails. It's nails on chalkboards. Nails.
Was it? I'm trying to remember.
Nails on chalkboards. Nails on chalkboard.
Nails on a chalkboard.
Nails on a chalkboard. Do you remember the laugh? It was just this worst, just impersonation.
It was like a weird, like, well, because she was trying to be like husky. She was trying to do this like husky voice thing, and like, because Lucille Ball was a tough broad. I mean, she was like a broad, right?
Yeah.
Nicole Kidman's not a broad.
Yes. So she had, in order to play this, so the week in their life, it was the week that Lucille Ball was being accused in the papers of being a communist. And so the whole week was that how it was so stressful for them. Really, the plot of the film doesn't even matter. Sorry, go on.
Well, I was going to say another side note, since we're taking these side notes, is that that whole thing in real life did happen, but it was not as dramatic and it didn't take up a whole week.
Oh yeah, and it was a different episode. There's so much that was like not factual. But I also too, I feel like we need to just have a moment for talking specifically about how this whole Nicole Kidman thing is. Because it's like she had bad plastic surgery to make her look lumpy. Were they face prosthetics or was it CGI? Like there was it just looked like a monster face.
It seemed like there was a combination between weird makeup that shaped her face differently.
Yeah.
And then there was just the weird makeup on top of it, which didn't make sense on her face because it made sense on Lucille Ball's face. So it just made Nicole Kidman look maniacal. And then there was a lot of flashback stuff to where they made her look 20 years younger, kind of, but it was just looked really creepy and strange and CGI.
Okay. Yeah, it was pretty. And then the whole Vivian Bounce thing was pretty. It was an interesting side plot.
Yeah. I just want to see the documentary. There's an Amy Poehler documentary coming out about Lucille Ball in March.
Okay, good. We'll talk about that. That was a good side note.
Yeah.
To move from Betty White to should we pull the other charts up?
Yeah. So do we want to go? We looked at Betty White. We looked at Bob Saget. Do you want to look at Sidney?
Yes. Let's look at Sidney and then we can wrap up with Bob Saget.
Okay. So you have Sidney's chart.
Oh, I do. Hold on.
Poitier.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
See, look at Moon Jupiter again, but we don't know when.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know when he passed, like when the moon was specifically. But
right.
But look at Jupiter.
Oh yeah.
He was having a Jupiter return in the 6th house. Jupiter on his sun to the degree.
Taking him off in that hot air balloon.
I want to pull up Like, ooh, I want to grab a book right now. I think it would be interesting just to click, because I think in this, the biggest conversation, I think, to sort of recap, has been this idea of what roles Jupiter and Venus can play in charts of people who are passing, who have passed,
Mhm.
and the passing
Right.
of lives. So interesting to think of this case, that having a Jupiter return, also he had, wow, all of that. I mean, Sun, Jupiter, Mercury and Venus in Pisces. And then Venus was going retrograde in his fourth house of home foundations, but also thinking about, like, again, being taken away with that retrograde.
Yeah.
I think this might be a good moment just to talk about Jupiter in general. Should we actually just pull up, because so we're not like, should we pull up Bob Saget's chart as well, just, and then just talk in general about, just kind of riff on Jupiter or Venus?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, stop share. While you do that, I'm going to grab a book.
Okay. Bob Saget. So yeah,
I'm going to look one thing up. Yeah, tell me your thoughts. First thoughts looking at this chart.
well, oh, also, sorry, I'm just taking it all in. I feel like oh yeah, and his moon right next to his midheaven.
Yeah, the moon opposite Jupiter. And we're also thinking too, it's interesting because in this case, the South Node playing, he was having a Saturn return. That was the first, I'm sorry, not Saturn return, a Saturn square, which is the first thing I thought was like, was wanting to know what happened. He would have just had his second Saturn return, and kind of curious about what would have happened during that time. Because it's interesting too, in 7-year cycles, usually Saturn transits, whether they be return or square, like the 7-year increment, there's always like a big pivot point in someone's life. Something comes to a crisis. It's interesting that Saturn was heading towards a conjunction, a while here, but with Mars by sign.
Yeah. Well, he got remarried. He's 65 when he died. And he got remarried like 5 years ago.
Okay.
So that's something. But yeah, with the South Node, I know that they're saying that he didn't, there were no drugs in his system, but it does make me think with that South Node right there, that it could also be, because he notoriously had a past, and sometimes the things we do in the past catch up with us later. He could have had an undiagnosed thing.
Oh yeah, because and thinking about too, right? Jupiter rules. It's interesting. Jupiter rules our body to some extent, right? So he had Jupiter making this opposition to the moon, but then also the South Node of loss in his first house. So it feels like there was something. I don't know to say. Does that make sense? Obviously there was something wrong with his body. It was taken away. It died.
Right. He was 65. I looked up, it looked like his father lived to almost 90 or something. Like people in his men in his family lived long. So yeah,
Okay.
it wasn't something like, I've seen people that like the men tend to pass away in their early 60s, and that's like a thing, like it can be hereditary, but it didn't seem to be hereditary for him. So definitely it's going to be something. You don't just die of natural causes at 65.
Yeah. And so I guess I'm trying to say this without sounding like more like I'm looking too much into his person, or that I have any sort of moral like statements of like, oh, he had it coming. But it's interesting to think that it almost seems like you're paying a karmic debt, like whether it's good or bad. And maybe it's just his time was done, like his body was like had done its thing. But there's something very clear about it. Feels that's the beauty of astrology, saying that, oh, like it's clear, like things are coming around and maybe it's time for the hot air balloon to take you away.
Yeah.
But specifically, sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, like time to pay. And it could simply be the way he treated his body early in life, and it created something that killed him later. Who knows?
I think this is a good time to quote. So Sam Reynolds talking on the Astrology podcast he was discussing Jupiter as being a matchmaker. And I thought it was interesting to think about in this situation, right? A matchmaker and the fact of what that looks like when Jupiter plays a role in someone's death.
Right.
May I read the quote to you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think of Jupiter as a match funder. He'll match you where you are. The idea of a match funder is someone who will match what has been received by a particular organization or a company. So if you raised $1 million, that match funder will raise another $1 million or give you another $1 million as an example, so that we have $2 million. So he'll match you where you are, which has positive connotations mostly. Who wouldn't want an extra $1 million if Jupiter is going to meet you there? But let's say you've not done anything, or you're not willing to do the work. It'll match you with, okay, then I'm not going to do anything. I mean, it's a little different case here, but even just think of this general idea of a match funder of like, okay, like I've lived my life in a certain way, and now Jupiter's coming back to like, to match that, right? Like if you have,
or like it's kind of like an eye for an eye karmically almost.
Mm-hmm. It's hard to talk about this. It's interesting. Like it's hard to talk about this particular chart for some reason without sounding moralistic.
Right.
And but also I just want to say that like there's this something you hit on earlier, maybe non sequitur, but Bob Saget was such a creeper. And like when he died, I was like, oh, like, I mean, I don't wish anyone death, of course. I mean, easy passage. I wish everyone an easy passage. But like, I feel like everyone sort of forgot that he like made fun of, like pretended to be a pedophile on like Full House and just did all these inappropriate things. And like comedians are like, oh man, he was pushing boundaries, but not really. And I love that what you said too, is like thinking about too, like sometimes this hot air balloon can like take us away. And it's kind of lovely, right? Like when you have this like Jupiter death transit, I mean, I can't speak to personal experiences, but usually there's something sort of like symbolically beautiful about that. And then thinking about like, as you succinctly put before, like maybe Jupiter took him away before he could get canceled.
Like your getaway car. Yeah. Well, I think that was one of the first things I said when we were talking about it. I was like, he never got canceled, did he? And it seemed like, I'm not saying that he ever, I'm not trying to start anything. I don't know. He, I
will. Why didn't he get canceled? Ugh.
Well, I mean, I don't like, I never followed his stand-up. I had seen some of it, and yeah, it was all pretty gross. It was mostly like jokes about, pedophiles and stuff. And it's just not funny, right? He seemed to be a comedian's comedian in the sense that like, those comedians that like, it's like for comedy's sake because he goes there, almost like a
but now we're canceling all those because we're like, actually that's kind of gross.
Right. Well, I was about to compare it to how like certain musicians will like really care about someone that's really good at guitar, but like most people don't give a crap because it's just okay, they play guitar really fast, who gives a shit? Like it doesn't sound great, right? But it's like, oh, the skill. I feel like it was kind of like he was looked up to for like how far he would take things on stage. That a lot of people didn't want to go there, which is very strange when you think about like how that's like a commendable thing to like be really gross or to like be really offensive, or I don't know. We're in a different time. That's the
I'm sorry, go on. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say we're in a different time now. It doesn't really work that way. So
I was thinking too, when you're talking about that, like taking things to the edge, making them big. It's interesting because natally, he has Jupiter in Leo in the 10th house with Pluto, right? Like making the big, like, I want to say like bringing up all the stuff that we don't want to think about, and like,
right.
Yeah, so that's an interesting, very performative Jupiter.
Now we don't know this time might not be correct. So house placements we're not totally sure about. But
okay, but we still know that it's Jupiter and Pluto in
exactly.
Leo. Okay.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, right there, it makes me think of like a person that would like take things too far. And then once you said, please stop, they just keep going. And I could see how that really works in the comedy world for a certain period, for an era, right? A certain era. But yeah, interesting.
Man, so I feel like I want to wrap this
especially
up.
In Leo. Sorry, one more thing. Just the fact that it's in Leo too. It's like, geez, attention for. I'm not trying to crap on anybody that's dead.
No, that's what I was saying. Jupiter and Leo. It is so like outlandish with that like Pluto there natally.
Yeah, it is. Who did that?
I kind of want to. So I feel like to wrap this up, should we have a general like so on all these charts, all three of these charts, we see that Jupiter's playing the significant role. So Jupiter has just moved into Pisces, its home. I think of Pisces as being the dissolving waters of the universe. How would you describe Pisces? And why are you blurry?
Oh.
Are you back?
I'm back. Wait. That was really weird. You sped up and went backwards. So I was confused a little bit. What was the last thing you said? It got real weird.
Oh, I guess I was just thinking about specifically Jupiter and Pisces. So this idea that Jupiter's gone to Pisces, and in all these charts, we see it playing a significant role, either I think in all of the cases, in some way or the other, and the moon is involved. Which is interesting, but we definitely see this Jupiter and Pisces is playing a part. So there's the Jupiter and Pisces, there's this like sort of dissolving. And at the same time with all of these deaths, we see Venus being in retrograde, like this idea of like, it's interesting too, because I think this is the beginning of a new Venus star cycle, a Venus star point, I believe. So it's this idea of like Venus ending the cycle and taking back and like almost like gathering her children to the underworld. But I thought it'd be interesting to talk a little bit about the hot air balloon analogy. I was going to read from the archetypal universe.
Oh,
just to like to muse on Jupiter for a moment.
Yeah.
And then we could talk about some of the Jupiter significations in death, if that works for you.
Yeah. I was going to say that, to put into example what we kind of just covered, but what you just said, with the Jupiter going into Pisces and then the Venus retrograde at the very end, like the people we talked about that we covered, that they're all part of a different era, right? They're an era that's past, that's gone. Betty White did everything she needed to do in this lifetime and then some, right? And she's good to go. Everyone that grew up with Full House was all like America's Dad. I was not a big Full House fan personally. I was watching the Cosby Show and Cheers. I don't know who these people were. Anyway, but But yeah, so there's a part of the population that's really all like, but America's dead. So they're, it's like he's part of a different time that's now gone. And yeah, so I think it's just kind of like putting that exclamation point on the end of a lot of things.
Exactly. So it's interesting to think about because obviously we don't know. This is maybe a larger topic, and I think you're getting at. I don't know any of these people personally. I can't speak to their personal lives or what was happening. But as a Venus retrograde symbolism, it's interesting to think that if Venus represents at large what we care about, what we love, if you think about like pop culture, these icons being taken away during Venus retrograde, right? I feel like has this rippling effect on fans. Like all of these people are somehow having to deal with their own longing and nostalgia. What was Betty White to me? I used to watch The Golden Girls. Is this over? Sidney Poitier and America's favorite dad or whatever, right? Like we're all sort of mourning our own loss of these symbols. And I think that's symbols. Yeah, I think that's something really great you just touched on.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you ready to read about Jupiter?
Yeah.
Sorry to what time it is too.
8:25.
Awesome. The Jupiter archetype manifests through our impulses to grow, reach out and expand our range of experience, to embrace wider perspectives, and to integrate ourselves into more inclusive wholes. Study, travel, and deep self-exploration are some of the satisfying ways to meet these needs and broaden our horizons. This archetype also underlies feelings of optimism, joy, and well-being, our sense of adequate resources, and our impulses to generally share with our fellow human beings. Jupiter represents those forces that seek to alleviate, amplify, and make things bigger, leading us to pursue success and accomplishment in whatever areas of life that we consider important. Spiritually, Jupiter suggests our impulses to move closer to or become more like what we consider to be true and right. It is behind our sense of the divine as being better than ourselves, as superior and existing on a higher level, and is having the capacity to uplift, improve, and make us whole, which I read that and I thought about this idea of a hot air balloon uplifting people and taking them away.
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay. Improve and make us whole. Jupiter's expansive nature seeks to draw our awareness back towards an identification with the larger universe and a more inclusive understanding of our cosmic status within it. Partial or unintegrated contact with Jupiter's expansive energy can also lead to the less salutary traits of arrogance, inflation, and excess. Material ambition is a kind of horizontal or lateral expression of Jupiter, while the heart of this archetype is towards an expansion of consciousness towards the universal mind and all things within it. From the transpersonal side, we might suggest that Jupiter represents the capacity of absolute consciousness to add the dimension of size to its creations, unveiling universes of incredible grandeur, complexity, and magnitude. The Jupiterian features of the world have the potential to evoke awe and amazement as we gaze across our sweeping natural landscapes or up at the deep night sky and ponder the vastness of the universe, which cosmologists now suggest may be only one of many.
I love that.
I love that he used the word sweeping, because that's what you kept saying about Jupiter as well.
Yeah. No, I was I saying that about Jupiter or Pluto?
No, I'm sorry,
Or
Jupiter.
both?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I was talking about both because I was talking about how they both, like, I never really thought about them.
They both being Pluto and Jupiter.
Pluto and Jupiter.
Okay.
And maybe that's something we can explore in a different video because I want to look more into it. But there are certain things that don't get talked about as much about that they have in common. And there's the sweeping quality, I think, is one. And the amplifying of things is another. But yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting to think too. I like and like there's thinking about Jupiter too, this indulgence of like, sorry, this is bad. I keep going back to like Bob Saget's chart. And I was like, ooh, was this too much cocaine catching up with him?
maybe. Because I mean, wasn't it Tom Petty died a few years ago, and they were basically chalked it up. I might have this all wrong.
Yeah.
So no quote, but because I didn't look it up earlier, but I want to say that it was something like just years of, he was sober then, I believe, but when he
Yeah.
finally passed, but it was just so many years of, putting his body through it that finally caught up with him, even though he had been sober for a long time. So I'm not saying that's what happened, but looking at Bob Saget's chart, I could see that being definitely a thing.
Any final thoughts?
Well, I think that what is my final thought? My final thought is that Mercury retrograde is on its way and we can feel it. So just brace yourselves, and that's okay. Take time. I think that this is not totally related to the death thing, but just in general, we've been dealing with retrogrades, and we're about to go into another one. And I think that any place that you can like stop and like take a break or reschedule something, like do it.
Yeah, when you say
Take
what's your so that's your general advice for Mercury retrograde?
Yeah, I mean,
if you want to just qualitatively describe this for people, maybe this is a good ending note.
Sure. Yeah, since we're kind of like, that's just kind of the next chapter astrologically that we're about to enter is the Mercury retrograde. And yeah, I mean, I'm not an advocate for like canceling things or not going outside. But I wouldn't advocate, if you have something already planned, that's fine. But I wouldn't try to plan anything big in the middle of it. Or this one's in Aquarius, right? So it's going to be a lot, it's all air. It's going to be a lot of, it's going to be, people are going to have a hard time articulating their ideas.
Yeah, that's how I've been thinking about mostly. Colin Bedell, right? And I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Queer Cosmos had this sort of wonderful monologue talking about Mercury retrograde as Mercury's giving us this opportunity to learn how to speak. And so thinking about right now with Venus retrograde, there is this sense of frustration we've discussed already. Maybe there's some tension in our life where we're trying to go after something. The universe just doesn't feels like it keeps putting up obstacles. Things aren't cooperating. So there's already some difficulties there. And then on top of it, right, like added to all this, Mercury is suddenly doing this checks and balance thing where we're talking to other people, but maybe we're responding to our thoughts as opposed to their words, vice versa. And so like during all of this mess, there is a need for great clarity. So thinking about I just think of this like retrograde as an invitation to slow down.
Yes.
And to ask people to ask people their feelings, or to repeat things, or to really listen before just assuming what the other person's talking about, or even what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Because we've already been in this Venus retrograde, which is leaving a lot of people feeling a bit haggard. So the last thing you want to do is then enter into Mercury retrograde, where you're just not hearing anybody, or not even listening to your own thoughts. Sometimes we might, I don't know, I could see that being something like talking yourself into something, and then you're like, well, why did I talk myself into that? Why would I think that I needed to do that? So I could see people possibly having a hard time trusting their own thoughts during this retrograde.
I like that.
Yeah. So I feel like, anywhere where you can take the time, reflect yourself, space, time, if you're doing stuff, traveling places, give yourself as much extra time. Just be kind to yourself.
Yeah, I like how you said there. I liked how you brought self-doubt into the conversation, right? Like not trusting. Wow, like talking about hearing. Let me see if I'm hearing you correctly. This is a time, you said, where we might not trust what we're saying. Am I getting that correctly? Okay.
Yeah.
So, which is,
Yeah, I feel like
go on.
I was going to say like not trusting our own thoughts, but then also because of that, like I feel like that could create a lot of scenarios of people just talking out their ass. And then you're like, but then later being like, what was I even talking about? Like I was just talking out of my ass. I don't know. I would try to I'm going to be mindful of that.
I feel like you said that, and I feel like this is like half my conversation today, like, or maybe all of my conversations ever. I sometimes feel I'm constantly talking out of my ass, despite the fact that I try really hard to know what I'm talking about. Sometimes it just doesn't hit. But also, building on that, this self-doubt, I think, is important for us to think about, specifically at a moment of Venus retrograde, where we might be having some self-doubt anyway, right? Like I think Venus retrograde, where there's a bit of unclarity around maybe our value, clarity. Maybe there's some uncertainty around our values, our valuables, jobs, etc., our loved ones, that can make us feel put us in a raw space already. And then not being able to speak on top of that can be extra frustrating. So for everyone out there who feels like your life just got amped up, it's okay. Mercury is a beautiful messenger who will deliver messages if we slow down to listen. Same with Venus, right?
Mm-hmm. Love it.
Yeah, I think that's the end of the monologue, right? So coming back to Mercury, it's this right time for getting messages. Venus too, if we're listening, right? Venus in this really beautiful symbolism, taking people away, like it's your time. Same thing with Jupiter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Love that. Love it.
This has been fun. I think next time we do these, I know that like I need to stop saying like, we labeled this the astrology of loss, but I'm going to suggest that next time we do these, we allow ourselves to have more of a fluid conversation. Because it's interesting thinking about Mercury in its shadow. I feel like we had this idea that we're going to talk about these things. My Mercury in Pisces, this already, and we ended up just going in waves, which is really awesome. But next time we do one of these, I think we should just ride the waves.
We'll ride the wave.
We'll
do it during retrograde, so it'll be, we're just going to dive right into that.
Yeah,
Aquarius, heady space.
Yeah, I think we should not even give them like titles, because I feel bad is what I'm saying for people who are like, oh, I'm going to learn like all of these astrological nuggets. And I hope some people gleaned something out of this.
I think so.
This was a rambling meditation, which was lots of fun for me. I hope you as well.
Oh, definitely, always.
Okay, let's do, if anyone is watching this, let's do a proper sign out.
Okay.
So I'm CV Henriette, Art of the Zodiac, who has made a New Year's resolution to stop saying and like. It's not working. This is Accidental Zodiac, conversation, sometimes astrology. I'm an astrology reader, astrologer. I do astrology readings, just not being able to talk anymore. Also, tarot, reach out to me. I am so lucky to have spent this past 45 minutes with my good friend William, reporting from Baltimore, astrologer too. Also wonderful photographer, videographer, and musician. Very humble human. I'll let you finish your sign off.
William Holloway, astrologer. The best place to find me right now is on Instagram, william.stanley.holloway. is my handle. And you can reach out to me for readings on there.
Wonderful. Thanks, friend. Have a beautiful night.
Thanks.